You're driving down the road, and suddenly in the corner of your eye, see a car, and it's barreling towards you. So quickly, you reach over and you put your arm out to protect your dog. It's basically the same thing you do for any passenger. But now, years later, every time you see something in your peripheral vision, you immediately flinch. It's a subtle reminder of that trauma you went through when that car just slammed into you. Now, bet you probably haven't given much thought of what your dog may feel when they go through the same situations with you, or they're on their own. I sure hadn't. In this week's episode, Caroline Aluppo joins me. Now, she's a dog psychologist with a master's in ethology, basically the study of animal behavior. Now, she's devoted almost 20 years in the dog industry working with dogs struggling with behavioral problems. Now, here's a little tidbit. Did you know it's believed that dogs have flashbacks and nightmares, and that they have PTSD? Think about it. The military and police dogs and what they also go through. And when you think about it, and you really think about it, it just makes sense that they too can be drastically affected as well. I'm so excited for you to meet Caroline. She's just so intelligent, and she's so logical and informative, and I feel so privileged that she joined me, and I just can't wait for you to meet her too. We are supported by thoughtht, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at preptht.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange. Losses and games, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. This is one, she doesn't realize this now, but I'm her new best friend. She's stuck with me. So this is going to be a great episode. She's so great. She's done so many different things. Welcome, Caroline Aluppo. Caroline, thanks so much for doing it. I know you're in Sweden right now. It's afternoon. It's morning here. And I know you're really busy, and taking the time really means a lot to me.
No problem. Great to be here with you.
Well, I want to start with, I always throw some loops in here. So I'm going to start with your background, because I was reading all about your background.
Mm-hmm.
You've done a lot of different things. I'm pretty amazed by everything except for the subject we're talking about. I mean, we'll get to the subject for sure, but I'm sure it leads into what you're doing. But you've lived all over the world. You've left that cold climate for one reason, I'm sure. But I really want to talk about everything you've done, because you know, the stuff you do with primates and everything else. Let's just kind of go in your background, and then we'll get into the real subject.
You've done your homework, Mark.
Hey, well, it's a rare moment. Trust me. Everybody's out there going, are you sure that's Mark Kyle on the thing?
Yeah, well, I have done quite a bit of everything. You know, I love animals. I always have done since I was a child. So it's all been animal related. But as a biologist, in the beginning, before I even got into ethology, I was all heads in for field biology and conservation of species. And orangutans and primates, smaller primates like the howler monkeys and such, really caught my attention. So I did some field work in Indonesia as well as in Ecuador. So I spent a lot of time in the jungle, really, with primates. It was great, absolutely fantastic.
Where were you in Ecuador? Ecuador has a special place for me. I've only been there once, but I didn't go to the Galapagos, but I've been all over the place. It's the most biodiverse country in the world, which most people don't know. But and part of it's because of Galapagos. Mm-hmm. Where were you in Ecuador?
It's it's the city. The closest city is called Coca. And then you go on like a little wooden canoe on the river Napo, and you go for like 3-4 hours in this small wooden canoe to a little island. And that's where this rehabilitation center was. So it was in the middle of absolute nowhere, in the middle of the jungle. But Coca is the closest city.
So is that like north, kind of in the Amazon area there? Is that,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I drove the whole country. It was, I mean,
Mm,
they've got that train where you can ride on the top of the train.
yeah.
Did you do that?
Yeah, super cool. In the tunnels, it was magical. It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
it was great. It was really cool. And you go see that thing they call it something Nereis with the nose on the mountain or whatever it was.
yeah.
See, I know you were going to be best friends. I told you that. We're in Indonesia, back in the jungles as well.
Yeah, in Bohorok. It's called Bohorok. It's just outside of Medan. And before the big, tsunami, there was a huge rehabilitation
Sure.
center there, and that was all destroyed by the tsunami, of course, but rebuilt now. But I was out there working with the orangutans for quite a few seasons.
I'm really jealous. So can you just talk? I know we're going to talk about PTSD, but can you just talk about it? Because I love monkeys anyway. So
Yeah, I mean, they're great. I mean, it was this rehabilitation center, and some of these orangutans were brought in. Either they came from, farms where they'd been in the actual, what would you call it? I'm losing my English here, but like in the fruit.
say it in Swedish, and if nobody knows, it'll sound cool.
But where they kind of try to grow harvest and fruits and palm oil and things like that. And these orangutans were, and some of them were really badly shot to get rid of them. And they ended up in the center. And then it was orangutans. I mean, back in those days, they were still given as gifts to royalties and to,
Right.
important people. And once they've got, sexually matured, nobody could handle these orangutans. So they were put in the center. Or they were just in markets, in bars, as a tourist attractions. And and they all had to be rehabilitated, of course, before they could be let out into the wild. So that was a process that I was involved in.
Have you heard of the Liberia chimp rescue group at all?
Yeah, yeah.
I've actually been in communication with them. I'm trying to get them on the show. I think they're doing amazing jobs out there too.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so now I have a question for you. Now let's get into the PTSD. I know you've been all over the place. I mean, you lived in Spain, you lived everywhere. So, but you got into PTSD. By the way, I'm gonna throw in a word that I didn't know what it was. It's gonna make me sound smart. So, ethology. I've never even read it, but you've got a doctorate in it, correct?
A master's degree in ethology. Yeah.
Master, a science of animal behavior. So everybody out there, just know I know that word now.
Yeah. I mean, ethology is like a branch within ethology, really. So within biology. So the basic, educational line is biology, but then you can branch into ethology, which is all about the science of animal behavior, animal psychology, animals' emotions, and language and communication, and pack strategies and stuff. So it's a super interesting topic, I think.
Well, I think it's amazing. And matter of fact, what you're doing is amazing. One of the things as I was doing the research, you see a lot of vets now that are paying attention to PTSD, but they don't have the experience you have. And I'm sure, do you get a lot of veterinarians that call you to get questions on if they've got a dog that they think's gone through some experience or something like that? Do you get that at all?
Yeah, I do around in Sweden. I do, and especially around the area I work. But it's on the rise, which is really really good, because they're becoming more aware of the mental health of animals and not just the physical health, and how these two things really affect each other. So lately, I do get a lot of those calls and vets that say your dog, before we can even start doing our thing, they need to go to Carol and get help with whatever issues they have mentally.
Well, with your love of animals is one thing, but what was your journey to get to doing what you're doing now? I mean, I know you do other stuff along this, but you're a specialist in this PTSD. How did you get there?
Well, it all started like it always does with a dog, right?
Right.
So when I was in Spain working with rescue dogs and street dogs there, I met this dog that just blew my mind. He was just absolutely fantastic. And he was to be put down. He was very, very aggressive and had severe issues. But I worked really well with him and we got along fine. So as pay for my work there, I got this dog that I took home to Sweden. And I was studying ethology at the time and I was a dog trainer already. But with him, I realized I need to become what we call here dog psychologist, which is like a dog behaviorist, really.
Sure.
So I jumped on that education and I started working with a lot of dogs quite quickly. And through these years, I've been working for 18 years, but during my first 5-6 years, I realized that, okay, some of these dogs, they're scared, they have aggression issues or resource guarding or separation dilemmas, but Some of them have really experienced something traumatic, and they've changed in more than one way. They've really changed. The whole entity of the dog is just different, and it's sunk so deep in them, and it's more than just your normal, reaction to being stressed. It's something else. So I started digging deeper into that, and when I went to do my thesis, I was like, I want to focus on this issue. And I thought of it as PTSD. So I said to the university, the agriculture university in Sweden, like, I want to do a cross study between human psychology and ethology, and look into how can the treatment plants and also the diagnostic tools that we got for PTSD in humans, how can we apply them to dogs? Is it even possible? Because they were really open-minded and great about it, they were like, okay, do your thing, go ahead, and gave me completely loose reins to just dig deeper into it, which was great. So that's how it started.
Well, I don't think open-minded said it. I mean, I think it's one, you're thinking outside of the box, and it makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah. I mean, if people don't do that within research and science, how are we going to get ahead ever? So that's super important.
Well, as I was doing the research, what's interesting to me, and, one of the things I find when I'm doing this podcast is that I keep looking at animals differently all the time. When I talk to people like yourself, you say, well, that makes sense. All the stuff that you're doing just makes sense. But everybody out there, well, I'm a little bit more limited than most, but most people, if we could look at it that way, because one of the things that shocked me was they haven't really paid attention to PTSD in dogs until about the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
That's shocking to me, really, if you think about, it makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. And I think it goes beyond dogs as well. I think any sentient being with a rich emotional life can suffer from PTSD.
Yeah, I saw some stuff where they actually did it was an experiment or something they were doing, or study. They went from mice and cats where they were giving them a traumatic experience, like I think a shocking thing they'd step on, and how it would affect these, whatever being it was. All of them across the board had an issue.
Yeah, there was a lot of studies before done on just like you say, on rats and cats. Horrible studies, but they gave us knowledge.
Yeah, of course. Well, let's dig into this now. Let's talk about PTSD in animals. Let's stay with dogs, I guess. But what causes it? How do you treat it? You do the talk. Let me listen. So when I talk to other people, I sound smart because I can tell them I know something.
Yeah, like when I sent out this big survey to a lot of dog owners that thought that their dogs had PTSD, and I picked out 57 that were diagnosed with PTS according to the tool that I used, the DSM scale that I kind of altered to fit dogs, and we saw common events, reoccurring events, and the biggest part of it and the common denominator was humans. So 44% of these dogs were affected by humans in some kind, beating or being frightened or harsh handled or abused in some way. So that was a big part of these dogs' experiences. And then it was also dogs that had been attacked by other dogs, and fright, of course, of noises such as fireworks and also car accidents. And a portion of them was also because of their previous living environment, like early neglect and not living in an optimal living environment.
One of the things I read too was, and it related to here because I'm in Texas, and we have tornadoes and hurricanes and all that. And I saw that read that a lot of these animals that go through that experience, it affects us as humans, but affects these dogs, and they get PTSD from being displaced or whatever the event was.
Yeah, and things like that. I mean, the common thing in these events is that the dog lost all control of the situation, and the dog lost all predictability, couldn't understand what was happening or why, and also the big fright of either being seriously injured or actually the life being threatened. So hurricanes and floods and big things like that are also events that could cause PTSD because they have all those characteristics.
Well, I think about, when you were talking about Indonesia, they had that, the big wave that came there and all those things. And then you have just recently the earthquake in Nepal.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of animals in all those places. I can only imagine, especially when they have less things available to them. Here these dogs walk around just freaking out and not knowing what to do with their life.
Yeah, and I mean in Sumatra, in Baharak, where when the tsunami hit, the people that were left there in the center, they emailed me and said the first thing we noticed was all the elephants, they were orangutans, they all headed into the jungle and tried to get as far as possible as they could, even before the tsunami hit, even before the people were aware that there was a tsunami coming in. So yeah, horrible situation for everybody involved.
Well, I know. So let's get back to the PTSD. So you've got these dogs, and how do you diagnose PTSD versus a dog just being a weirdo?
That's a good question. Often we see that it is like a pre an event and then a post-event situation. So the dog changes after the event that has happened emotionally. There's a big change in the dog. But some of the dogs in the study were rescue dogs, rehome dogs that nobody knew nothing about. But we just saw that they all tick the boxes for PTSD. And those boxes are often hypervigilance, and there's an increased arousal in the dog that's above normal. We also see trigger reactions. So different things that the dog connects to this old trauma triggers fright, or for a dog that could be displayed as, aggression. And an avoidance of these triggers, so actively trying to avoid them or trying to scare these triggers off. And then you also see often that their sleep pattern is disturbed. If they used to sleep, really well and without much, comfort from their owner, these dogs often change to sleeping either extremely much because they were so overwhelmed by their emotional life, or with half eye open, always on the hypervigilance, really disturbing their sleep. So they were just sleeping really lightly. And some of the dog owners in the study also thought that their dogs were having nightmares. We can't really ask the dogs, but the dogs used to wake up and howl or bark or act in a way that they didn't before this incident. And if it's, long term, if it's gone on for a few years, often what we also see is the dog's body posture is changed into a fright position or a ready, alert position. So they're not happy-go-lucky anymore. They don't enjoy what they usually did enjoy. They're kind of withdrawn. And some also developed gastrointestinal issues like constipation or cataract or diarrhea due to stress, or like an IBS kind of dilemma.
Right.
And this is what we see in humans as well. So it was very many similarities.
That's funny. As I was listening, I was thinking about humans. One of the things too, you said you were talking about nightmares. I read about flashbacks too. I know you can't. It's funny with I do stem cells, and when we do some things, when we treat kidneys, they actually their hearing comes back. You can't test a dog. Hey, what do you hear that sound there? What does it sound like? But with them, I thought it was really interesting, both the nightmares and the flashbacks. And again, it always relates back to humans to me. At least that's from my little brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now you've got them diagnosed. So let's talk what's next steps. You're doing your study. You've got these dogs. What do you do then?
Good question. And the boring answer is it depends, because it so much depends on the dog. I mean, the first thing I want to do with a dog is make sure, that they get really great nutrition, because they're on the verge of burning out, just like a human with PTSD would be after a few years. So good nutrition and a really healthy diet, so they get all the nutrients they need, everything they need to be able to produce hormones like, serotonin, feel happy and lucky again. So that's the first thing, to make sure they're eating well and eating a good diet.
Okay, let me ask you a question. This is something else I read. I was reading an article on PTSD, and there are actually certain foods for calming dogs down. Do you do that as well? I mean, just
yeah.
So can you kind of tell, for people who are listening, you may have somebody, what kind of and I like I told you, I'm going to interrupt you, but can you tell them what those kind of foods would be for somebody that's got a dog that's even anxious or something that may calm them down?
Yeah, the first thing you want to do, I always ask all my clients, like, take a picture of your dog food, the ingredients, let me have a look at it. And I want to reduce anything that could be a burden on the dog, too much starch or rice or corn or things. That's not a carnivore diet. So I want to reduce all that and any additives and, things like that, and make sure they're eating a diet that they can really take out the nutrients of. So I prefer a raw diet, but it depends on the dog owner, what they're comfortable with. And if not, I might want to add supplements like omega-3 that really boosts, the signal substances and the hormone and the endocrine system in the dog. B vitamin that makes the dog more, better at stress management, as well as magnesium, which these dogs are often low on because that is really used a lot of the body when the dog is in high stress. So we might want to add that as a supplement. And then tryptophan is a big and important thing to get into that diet. And it's natural in a lot of meats and seeds.
Turkey.
Turkey and moose. We've got a lot of moose out here in Sweden.
We don't have any moose. They don't have any moose. We do have them in the north part of the U.S., but we don't have a lot of moose out here.
No, and it's great because you can buy it as a supplement and add it. And, I want to do one thing at a time and add these things to see, how does this balance the dog? They need all those nutrients really to have an optimal health. So that's number one, really. And then there's other supplements with ingredients that are aimed to, help a stressed dog become more calm and a scared dog become more courageous. But those are the main things: B vitamin, magnesium, omega-3, and the tryptophan. Those are important to me.
What's kind of funny is, here in the U.S., we have the holiday Thanksgiving, right? And so typically, and Christmas and Thanksgiving, a lot of people have turkey. And one of the things everybody talks about after you eat, everybody's always tired, and they talk about the tryptophan right there. But, I never thought, well, if you got a dog that's really anxious, just give them turkey, they'll go to sleep.
Yeah, there's a point in that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's funny. So keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and after that, I want to make sure that the dog gets the sleep he or she needs. So we want to have a sleeping routine that really winds the dog down. I use a lot of tactical massage. So just that really tactical, slow massage, which releases oxytocin. So I want to add that on a daily basis so the dog is helped into really deep breathing and deep calmness, and given the chance to sleep and rest not only at night but plenty of times throughout the day. And that's important because they need that to actually process their emotions. That happens in the dream world, so they need to sleep, and they need to sleep quite a lot. And after that, I want to make sure that their environment is as trigger-free as possible, because if they are subjected to triggers all the time, the stress system will just shoot through the roof. So if it's possible, reduce triggers. And then I want to make sure that the dog lives under very clear and quite boring routines. So no adventures, not heading out on big hikes, but to keep, the walks consistent, same places, and also give the dog information of what's going to happen. It's time to eat. Now you're going to get your bone. We're going to take a ride in the car. Let's go to the woods. We're going out just for a stroll. Talking to the dog, saying the same cues, the same signals over and over again, so the dog gets back that feeling of control and predictability that they lost in the event where they were traumatized. So that's super important, to give the dog as much information as possible and keep the daily life routine kind of boring, no news.
Well, you know what? It's kind of interesting though, because I'm related. My son's 8. I mean, he's 30 now, but he's severely ADHD. Of course, I am too. But one of the big deals with them is it's structure.
Yeah.
Here's what we're doing. This is what you can do, and that's basically what we're doing with the dog as well. Then.
Absolutely. And when I get clients that say, like, I've got ADHD, I always say, great, you know exactly what your dog needs, because it's that structure, it's that repetitive, predictability that is stress reducing. So that's super important for these dogs. After that structure, I want to make sure that we look at, the emotional wheel. So if we on the one hand have fury and fright and stress and feeling insecure, I want to look what's on the other side of that round wheel. Well, we've got happiness, we've got curiosity, we've got lust, and we've got happiness and courage, and we want to boost that in the dog. So what my clients often have get to do before we even get to the trigger training is to try to boost the positive emotions in the dog. And that could be done by, if we look at courage, it could be balance work, balancing on things, finding your inner peace and your balance, taking a deep breath and not just rushing through these trainings, but finding that balance. Or I do one training that's where they get to push. I put my hand on their breastbone and I feed them. And in the beginning, a really scared and insecure dog will just nibble at that treat and not push hard towards my palm at all. But with some training, they start really, stepping up and pushing and grabbing onto that treat. And that is really coming out of your shell, asking for something. I also like to put the bark on a cue. So I teach the dog to bark on a cue, especially the quiet, insecure, bottled up introvert dogs. I want them to release their voice and bark. So we practice barking a lot. And it can be like tug of war, or it could be scent tracking or nose work or whatever gets this dog ticking and makes them proud and happy and feel confident. I want to do a lot of that work before we even get into the trigger training. And it's kind of emotional balance, really.
When you're doing bark training, so are you barking yourself?
Yeah, I do the do as I do, the social learning thing. Yeah. And it's so sweet with these dogs because the insecure, scared dogs, normally when they start, they do like a little bark and they kind of try to find their voice. But of course, if we practice it a lot, the bark becomes deeper and they become more secure and they let out more energy, which is the process. That's what it's all about, really.
That's great. So I'm sorry. I told you. Anyways, so you do the bark training, and then from there, what do you do?
Yeah, the next thing, now I want to have a checkpoint and see, okay, all the lists, we always make a list in the beginning, what stresses have we got, what triggers have we got, what indication of this dog being unbalanced and not happy do we have, what grade of depression have we got in this dog. And I want to revisit that list and see okay, where are we on this scale? Has anything improved? If nothing has improved, even though we've done all these things, I want to look at medication. And it's not for all dogs with PTSD, but with some dogs with PTSD and PTSD complexa, or dogs that have been in this state for many years, sometimes the chemical balance in the brain is completely off and we can't reach them. And for those dogs, it's just like having a dog with severe arthritis or pain, why not help them along to stabilize their inner feelings as well. But like I said, I'm not really for medicating dogs to silence or to calmness, but with the PTSD dogs sometimes we need it just to help them along. So that's like a checkpoint where we decide, does this dog need medication or not? And if we put the dog on any form of anxiety medication, the point is to have the dog on that medication for the month needed to do the trigger training, and then we want to slowly phase out that medication.
So are they sedatives? Is that what they are, sedatives?
No, what I prefer, we've got a few different choices medical-wise, but what I prefer is a medication that doesn't just make the dog calm, but really affects the anxiety level rather. So it's a medication that's used if the dog's got compulsive disorder or things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a sedative.
Are you doing anything with CBD? I know that's a big thing these days.
Yeah, I have a few clients that have tried it on their own, but I haven't really tracked the progress of those dogs, so I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. My problem with the CBD thing, and it's not against or for, is that you've got different people that are not that regulated here, at least here in the U.S., that you don't know where you're getting each time you get it.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a measurable amount of whatever CBD they're using.
Yeah. I'd love to see a standardized study on the thing. So really to be able to check out what's actually having which effect.
So I guess it's your last choice is to go to the medication. Once you do that, then where do we go from there? That's
where we head up to the trigger training.
Okay.
And this is what most client wants to deal with at the start. How do I stop my dog from, biting the neighbor or lunging at dogs on the walk or crawling up to a little ball when the fireworks bang outside or whatever it could be. But that's the absolute last thing we do. We want to balance that emotional system first. And what I always tell my clients is when we get to trigger training, it's like a phobia training. These dogs are deadly scared of whatever triggers they have. So we have to, less is more. We have to be very subtle and work below the threshold for stress, because if we do stress the dog when trigger training, we risk flooding and overexposure that will just reinforce and re-traumatize the dog, really. So we want to avoid that, and we want to practice it a little bit every other day and make sure that the dog wants the training. And that sounds pretty strange, how do you know if the dog wants to trigger train?
Hey, you want some training? Oh,
yeah,
sure.
exactly.
And you bark at him. No, it's you. I know you don't talk to him. You bark.
Exactly. But what I do is I set up like a routine where I ask the dog, are you ready? And if I get, a glance or the dog looks at the reward, the dog is saying, yeah, I want to go. And if it's about, noise training, or if it's about working with a decoy dog that appears, that dog doesn't appear until the dog we're training with have said, yes, I want to do this. If the dog looks away, shies away, yawns, smacks their lips or licks their nose, any kind of stress response, that's when I go, okay, cancel, we're not doing anything. So we listen to the dog in this way. And the first few times, the dog doesn't understand what we're doing. So we have to repeat this until they get the association that if I look at the treat jar or at you, this dog will appear or the sound will appear. And I start at if we just take like dogs, for instance, dogs that have been attacked by other dogs and can't stand the look of them, I start at a really far distance, and sometimes I break the trigger up. If the primary trigger is another dog, I break that trigger up, which means that I work with the scent of dogs, the sound of dogs, and the sight of dogs, like a silhouette or a stuffed up like toy dog, before I bring a real dog out, because we really want to make this as easy as possible for these dogs. And then we work with counter conditioning. So whatever this dog is ready to work for, if it's a toy or a treat, we associate the trigger with the reward. And the reward is always given away from, in this case, the decoy dog. So never towards the dog, but away. So we increase the distance. And at the same time, the dog we're training with is being rewarded. We take away the decoy dog. So that thing that really is the stressor disappears as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
Just to give the dog like a really clear and clean training where they feel, okay, if I can look at that dog and without trying to either lunge at it or flee from it, I get a reward and I get to walk out of the situation, increase the distance, and he disappears. Great. Win-win.
I love that idea. So basically, you have them turn around, you give them the treat or whatever it is, and then they look back and say, "That dog's gone, man. If I do this, that dog's not going to be there." That's really cool.
Yeah, and I mean we can do this like 4 or 5 repetitions, and then I always take them away for a stress release. And it's all about thermodynamics, really, releasing the bottle up emotion, whatever it could be, and that could be going away and barking on cue. To release that tension, or running, or playing tug of war, or biting a stick, or whatever the dog wants to do to release that tension. Because if we keep doing the trigger training 20 repetitions, the dog will just bottle up stress, and there will be a trigger stacking, and that will be an accumulation of stress that won't help us really. So I really want to add these, distance, stress release, and then we'll go back and do it again if the dog's up for it. If I ask the dog to come up on this stage and this training setup again, and the dog says, no, I don't want to do this, we'll take it another day. So it's all about doing it on their terms. They need to say, yeah, I want to face my fears. I want to, face these demons I have within me. And if they don't say that, we won't reach any, good point, really. So it's better to take it slowly.
One of the things I'm going to read it because there's big words in this thing, but I was reading that somebody was talking about when you do that, one of the big things to do is active play, even for short periods of time. So they call it large amounts of brain-derived neutrophil factors happen when you play. And what that does, it helps your neural growth. Again, I'm reading this thing, so it's not that I remember all this. It helps your neural growth, and it helps bad memories to be replaced with positive ones.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're doing.
Exactly. That is what we're doing, because what happens with PTSD dogs is like the self-healing mechanism of the mind is completely broken. And these dogs, the trauma is kind of caught in the short-term memory. And that's why these triggers haunt them. They are reminded of whatever happened to them, whether it's 2 months ago or 5 years ago. They just keep being reminded because it's in the short-term memory. And we want these dogs to process what they've learned during this training session, and we want them to process what happened before versus what's happening now, to place that memory of the trauma in the long-term memory. So walking out and playing or just taking a walk really helps that.
Well, you're rewiring the brain. I mean, that's what, they talk all the time, and for humans in particular, if you got a habit, if you keep doing something different all the time, your brain will rewire and think differently every time because you have a natural reaction to something. So that's exactly what you're doing.
Exactly. I worked with this dog yesterday, actually. It was a dog that came from Romania, a rescue dog. And this dog, she had a lot of trouble with men and with fast movements. If I move my arms too fast or stomp my feet, she'd just curl up in a ball. And also light. I think they must have worn like flashlights on their heads or in their arms or something, because this flash of lights really got us super scared. So we were practicing lights, and in one instant, she just dissociated. She just lost it and curled up, and she wasn't there anymore.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, super sad. And we actually nudged. We didn't stay below the threshold of stress. For some reason, we actually went above it, and this can happen when you trigger train. And when she dissociated and curled up, she was not in her body anymore. It was like she wasn't there. So I started this. Like a tickly massage. It's about reminding them of the outskirts of their body, really. So it's a short and tickly massage. And after a while, she kind of looked at me, and it was like she came out of whatever mindset she was in. And as soon as she did that, we walked away and we started playing with this little rabbit skin I had on a rope. And she got out of it all. And the super interesting thing was when I asked her, "Are you ready?" And I looked at the place where we had been training. She looked at me, she took like a deep breath, and she walked onto that place again. She was like, "Yeah, okay, let's give it another go." And I said to the client, I said, "Wow, this dog she's so scared, but she's also so extremely brave, because she just went through that and she still said, yeah, okay, let's give it another go." So we did like a super easy session where she just got to feel, on top of the world. And then we ended it all, which is super important.
Took a deep breath, said, "Okay, I'm going to try this again." That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And I mean, what they're facing is their deepest, darkest frights, really. And she said, "Yeah, okay, bring it on, man." And that was super cool.
Again, this goes back. I'm so repetitive. It bothers me even. But it goes back to humans. It's the same. It's the exact same experience. We just don't think about it that way. They're just beings, and they're going through the same thing. We have some big issue that triggers us.
Yeah.
We've got to take a deep breath and do the same thing.
Yeah, and it also pinpoints, that you cannot help anybody who doesn't want to help themselves. I mean, if that dog would just walk off and say, "No, I'm not doing this anymore," I would say, "Okay, I'll meet you again in 2 weeks and we'll give it another go," because the dog, as well as a human, needs to want help, needs to want to get better.
Right.
Super important.
Wow. Now, we talked about this one time, and it really resonated with me because we were talking about my dog. So there's some theory out there that when puppies are in the womb and the mother has gone through a traumatic experience, is that the cortisone levels are whatever levels affects the puppies, and these puppies come out and they're whatever anxious or whatever because it transfers over to them.
Yeah, prenatal stress. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not uncommon, especially in these like rescue dogs that have been bred and brought up in really bad environments. I see it
Puppy
all the
mills.
time. Yeah, absolutely, puppy mills. I see it all the time. And they haven't got a good chance in life when they're born with those stress levels.
So if you had an animal like that, because I do, but if you had an animal like that, since they don't even know what's bothering them, how would you train that with your trigger, skills and all that stuff too?
Yeah, I think I'd focus a lot on, the nutrition, the sleep, and the balancing of the emotions. I'd pay a lot of attention to that. Just, okay, what are you feeling? Is it anger, fright, or stress? And what's the opposing emotions? And how can we boost that? How can we make this dog a superhero, feeling, on top of the world? So I'd focus a lot on that. And then I'd be very observative and try to see what are the triggers. Even if this dog just feels that everything in the world is super scary, what is it actually that is triggering the fright? And try to define that to be able to trigger train.
Well, I have a challenge. My dog is your challenge. You never know with that. So I want to talk a little bit about, and we talked about the deal following a dog through this too. Let's get to that in a second. But I want to talk about military dogs and, these dogs that are coming back because of all the different wars. Again, people are looking at it now in the last 10 years with animals having PTSD. One of the things I read was at least 10% of these dogs that are in these environments, just like humans, are coming back with PTSD. And my first thought was, well, why we take and put them in that environment if we know it's going to happen to them? But then, of course, we've got humans who are doing the same thing. What's your thoughts on all that?
God, that's tricky. I just hope technology comes up with something that is better than a dog's nose. I mean, we haven't so far, but the dog's nose and sense of smell is, it's impossible to kind of reenact in some kind of technical form. But once we've done that, maybe all these dogs will get a break, because that's what we're using them for, really, to detect, people or bombs.
To save lives, yeah.
Yeah, to help us save lives. And it's a moral and ethical dilemma, really. Are we allowed to use other sentient beings with their own value for our struggles and our fights and our wars? Today we are, but if technology really kicks in and helps us solve that issue, maybe these dogs will get rest, because it is such a shame. They never asked for this, they never signed up for it. They're just put in these situations because we need them.
The crazy thing here in the U.S., I had an episode with a group that actually they get service dogs that are retired. So what happens is these dogs, and they're trying to make them when they're younger, but around 10 years old, they retire them. And in the military in particular, they're considered a piece of equipment. They're not even considered a being.
No.
Right. And now, of course, the handlers think differently. But if they're over in Afghanistan, a lot of these dogs, they don't have the money to bring them back. So these guys are raising money to get these dogs come back. But oftentimes they have to go through psychological training and rehabilitation because they've been used as, these athletes to do all these things. But again, they're not treated the same way. And it's kind of, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure what my opinion is on it, but it kind of bothers me.
Yeah, me too. It doesn't, since they can't say yes to this. But that's what mankind do. We use different animal species for a lot of things. It's the same with horses and cattle and all these other animals. We use them to our advantage.
That reminds me of something about horses. You were also a jockey.
Yeah, I used to race horses, actually. That's true.
That's so for all listeners out there, did you hear all those things she's done? Just so you know.
Yeah. And on the topic of using animals to our advantage, horse racing is just, really just competition and fun for humans. I got into it at a young age because I just loved riding and I loved thoroughbreds. And I was thrilled with, the feeling of riding on one in a pack of 10 doing maximum speed. It was a huge thrill. And quite a lot of the horses in Sweden, we've got quite strict, animal welfare rules, but quite a lot of them enjoyed the running, but there was always some of them that just ran out of fright. And those horses were, I did not enjoy sitting on them because it never felt ethical.
Well, what most people don't know is that it takes an amazing athlete to be able to ride a horse too, by the way.
Oh God, yeah.
just as an FYI.
Oh,
So I know I float all over the place, but I read there was a doctor. This guy's name is again I'm reading Dr. Nicholas Doman, I think his name,
yeah.
and do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, wow! I found a good one then. But
Yeah.
he says, see, everybody, see how smart I am. Anyways, he says PTSD can be managed but not fully cured because dogs never forget. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I so agreed with Mr. Duman. This is so true. I always say that to my clients. We can't cure this, but we can manage it. We can treat it and help the dog get better, but we can never erase that memory. It's like us. We're all, a part. We're all the sum of all our experiences, negative and positive, and the same goes for dogs. So we can't, if if a client has a dog and it used to be all happy-go-lucky, and then the fireworks happened, or that dog attack, or that groomer that pinned the dog to the table when it growled, we can never erase that, but we can help the dog not to be frightened on a daily basis. We can help that dog feel secure and happier, but we can't just, control, delete everything that's happened to that dog. No.
That's sad at some level, I guess. But I guess with humans, it's always there.
Yeah.
It's just in a distant memory, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, when we talked on Saturday, we're talking about following a dog through and that. You want to kind of talk a little bit how we can do that, maybe, and follow through on what we're talking about?
Yeah, a case study, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I have this dog that I've been working with for a while. It's a French bulldog, and he's a sweetheart. He's such a sweet dog, but he's got really bad resource guarding to the extent where he just attacks anybody and anything that comes close. And when we did, the evaluation of him, I was like, okay, what's happened to this dog? He was the puppy of a litter of 10, and that's a big puppy litter. And at a very early age, he had to fight for his food. When trying to get milk off his mom, or when they started feeding them in bowls, they had like this huge big bowl, and all the puppies had to fend for themselves, trying to get what they could. And this puppy was the shyest, smallest, skinniest dog. He didn't succeed. He had to fight for his food at a very early age, and he didn't succeed very well. And he ended up in this family who most of them wanted, to help him, and realized when he went into his growth spurts, which they do at 5 months and 7 months of age normally, they realized that, okay, he's guarding his bowl, he's guarding his bones, he's guarding everything, and he starts looking for food outside. And they tried to help him, but unfortunately, one of the people in this family thought that the way to stop the growling and the biting was to correct him and punish him for this behavior. And this person did this to quite a horrible extent. So when I met this dog, Harry, he was.
I was going to ask what his name was. Harry.
Yeah,
okay.
Harry. He was super, super scared. I mean, he was angry and vicious and aggressive, but inside he was just this little puppy, super, super scared. And he'd gotten the beating out of one of his dog owners that, he'd probably experienced at an early age as well. And when training him, he was so, open to training with me, but not with the person in the family that had been harsh to him. If that man lit out of his chair or just moved, he would just start attacking anything because he got so scared. So we've been working together for 6 months now, and the big dilemma, this dog, I mean, what he did on a daily basis when he didn't have food or bones was that he was still extremely scared and tried to avoid the man in the family all the time and lunged at him whenever he, did a fast move or raised his voice. So we had to the trigger elimination that's so important was impossible because he lived with a person that had actually reinforced and re-traumatized him over and over again. So it was a really tricky case, and low exposure, the threshold for stress was hard when this guy was around. So I had to take him out of the picture and to start helping this dog, just understanding that when you have something, the people around you will not take away, but will give you more. So we'll set him up in this, behind a fence, and he'd get a bone and we'd walk past in an arch, looking back and showing our necks, showing all the signals that kind of conveyed to him that we're not here to fight you over this bone or this bowl of food. We're here to give you more. And then we'd toss him a treat or another bone. So he'd over time realize that when these people come close, after saying, Harry, we're coming by, he understand over time that after that cue, they'd come past and give me more. So we kind of made him understand that we're not here to take, we're only here to give you more. So we had to do that over a long period of time. And after a while, he'd let us get closer and closer because he was expecting to be given something and not something having taken from him. And after that, we worked with toys and sticks and other things that weren't food, just the drop and release. But with dogs with resource guarding, coming towards you and releasing in your hand isn't always the goal, just to release on the spot and being guided away to stay while we went over to the resource, a stick or a toy, and just touched it and rewarded him for letting us touch it. That was super important for him. And then after a while, we could do these with bones that had low value at the same time as we rewarded him with something of really high value for him. So he always thought that, I'll gain something from doing this. I won't lose anything. I'll gain even greater resources from this cooperation. And that went really, really well, but he just could not get over it with the man in the house, which is it's so understandable if you look at a human being subjected to something extreme, violence, sure, really, from a person that you keep living with. It's really hard to feel safe and secure, of course. So we're actually now at the time talking about rehoming him because he's so good with his resource guarding and he can even pass the bowl, leave it to get a treat, and leave a bone to get a treat. But the main issue is this guy in the family. And he kind of understands the dilemma, but he's stuck in his ways, He keeps falling back into getting a little bit too angry at times. So it's a case where we are getting all the way for the sake of the dog, but maybe not staying in that family because of the situation.
Are you familiar with the movie When Harry Met Sally?
Yeah, classic.
So we got to find a Sally for Harry.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is with him, we need to find a Sally for him that really understands his background and feels for him. So, you never want to pressure that dog into something that could awaken that, feeling of insecurity again. But I have good hopes for him because he's a super sweet dog.
So what I want to do is what we talked about. I want to do a follow-up episode where we can actually find out if Harry met Sally.
Yeah.
No, I really want to do that. But I do want to move to one other thing because I know we're kind of running a little bit out of time and I've taken all your time. Is let's talk about Petley. I know you're involved with that. Again, here's another thing she does. Let's talk about that so people can understand it. So, you can talk a little bit about that so people can find out and, something you do. So,
yeah, sure. Thanks. About 2 years ago, I headed into the tech business, which was far away from applied ethology. But my co-founder reached out. He said, I've looked at you. You're all over the country. You're traveling everywhere to kind of raise knowledge and awareness about dogs and the emotional lives of dogs and proactive training and, how not to help your dog not to get PTSD, really, with the proactive training. And he said, it's kind of ineffective because you can only reach so many people. So why not put it in an app? And that was all new to me. So I was like, oh, wow, how can an app help people? But we kind of put our heads together and created Petley. And Petley is a dog app. It's more than a training app, even though it's got a lot of trainings. It's got over 170 trainings and it's got 8 courses and about 190 different articles. And it's all written and done by ethologists, veterinarians, dog physiotherapists. So it's, reliable sources. But there's always also a community, like a social media community for dog owners who share, the passion for positive reinforcement. And there's challenges and other fun stuff that we do every week. So Petley is a great, really, a companion app for dog owners, and they're guided along, the lifelong journey with a dog from the thought of getting a puppy till the senior days. We've got content for the whole journey, really. And I think the most fun part with Petley that I truly enjoy working behind the scenes is our medal challenges. It's like a feature where you can send in videos of your dog training and get feedback, or ask questions and get feedback. So I'm one of the people that are behind those scenes and answering all those questions and feedbacking training. So it's like a hand-holding, a guide in dog life, really.
Well, it's interactive, which is good.
Yeah, it's super good. And we just released 2 months ago, we released everything in English. So it's available in the US. Just, go to App Store, Google Play, and you can download the app.
Well, so I was going to tell everybody they should get Duolingo so they can learn how to learn Swedish. And then they could do the app.
No, you don't need to. It's all in English. Okay. It's all in English.
Well, that doesn't mean here in America we speak English, but we try.
You do a good job.
Okay, so again, though, we've talked about that, but if people want to get a hold of you, how do they find you? How do they find the app? Give them all that stuff. You've got the platform, so let's put it out there so everybody has a good way of communicating with you or finding about the app or whatever else.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Well, you'll reach me on, say, Instagram, Facebook, Caroline Aluppo. And you can always see my homepage, carolinealuppo.se, and it's all in Swedish. Or drop an email, info@carolinealuppo.se, and I'll reply. And the app is downloadable in App Store or Google Play.
It is in Apple.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Perfect. Okay, so this is my favorite time that I always start cringing right away. So as everybody knows, the time is for the joke. And I understand you told me you have a joke, so I want to hear your joke.
All right, let's go. Okay. So there's these two friends. They walk into the zoo. And they're walking around going, oh, wow, look at all these great enclosures. They're enriched, and there's, feeding stations, but they can't see any animals. And they keep walking along going like, oh, God, where are the animals? Where are the tigers and monkeys and bears? So am I? And they can't see anything. And they come up to this one enclosure, and there's a dog in there, a really sweet, little, cute dog. And one of these friends goes, oh, it's a Shih Tzu.
I love it.
It's a Shih Tzu.
I got it completely. I totally have it. See, I have fun doing this stupid thing. Anyways. Okay, so first of all, Caroline, you are stuck with me forever now. You realize that.
Great.
But I so appreciate you taking the time. For everybody out there listening, I'm sure they appreciate learning all this. I think it's really good information that you don't really think about it, but it's so important to do. And again, thanks so much for listening. And then for everybody out there, we're always looking for new jokes. I don't know if you can compete with a Shih Tzu joke, but if you've got a good joke, what you want your kids to tell it or whatever, you can email me at mkyle@forrealpodcast.com. If you got a great idea for a story, something that's similar like this, whatever, again, just reach out to me. We'll get back to you. Everybody out there, again, thanks so much for listening, and pass it on, because this is good information for everybody. The more people we have listen, the better stories we get and all that. Everybody, thanks so much. For real. One last thing. I'd like to give listener Justin Bain a shout out. Justin contacted me with some constructive criticism, and it was really helpful. He mentioned that our intro teaser music was a little loud and you could hardly hear the intro. We listened and we agree. Hopefully this week's intro is better. So thank Justin. I really appreciate it, and I realize we can always improve. So guys, keep the constructive criticism coming. It's really helpful. We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
That includes concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.